Hello Year 9 and welcome to a new term and a new topic in geography. This term we're going to look at a topic called development, and to start off we're going to discuss the methods used to measure development. So for this lesson our learning objectives are first of all, understand development, what HIC, NEE, LIC means. We're then going to describe the distribution of HICs and LICs around the world, so where are HICs and LICs found in the world. And then finally, we're going to understand the different ways we can measure development and their strengths and weaknesses. So how do we measure if a country is a HIC or an LIC? And then we're going to look at whether those different measures are good or bad. So equipment you need is in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, you're going to need the internet. You're going to use WordWall. You need a pen and paper or a Word document. Either or, doesn't matter which one you use, as long as when you're using pen and paper that your writing is clear so we can read it when you upload it to class charts. Just a quick reminder of know your level. And again, not saying anybody's stuck on these levels. You can do a higher level if you feel like you want to push yourself. But if you're up to a grade 4, we expect you to be doing developing tasks. If you are 5 to 6, you should be doing the secure task. And if you are a 7 or above your MG grade, you should be doing the mastered tasks. Okay, so learning objective 1 of this lesson is to describe or define what development is. So what I'm going to ask you to do, your task starts off with a word wall activity, and this is a gap fill where you will create a definition for development. So for developing, can you open up word wall, and everyone needs to do is open up word wall and create your definition for development. Once you've done that, you can move on to the secured task, and this is where you'll need to use a pen or paper or your Word document. Can you think of 2 countries that have high levels of development? So just 2 examples of 2 countries that have high levels of development. For mastered then, what makes these countries you've chosen have a high level of development? So these countries have a high level of development because. Once you've done that, can you take a screenshot of your word wall and your secured and mastered task on your piece of paper? Okay, just going to ask you to pause the video now. You can open up word wall and then you can come back to this task after you finish that to do the secured and mastered task. Remember to take a picture of all your pieces of work that you're creating right now. Before we move on to our second learning objective, I just want you to read through the definitions for LIC, HIC, and NEE. Definitions are on this slide, so I'm just going to ask you to pause the video now and read through the definitions. Okay, moving on to learning objective 2 of this lesson, we're going to look at where the HIC and LIC countries are located in the world, okay? So the question we're going to look at is, using figure 1, describe the global distribution of wealth. So if we break that question down, all that's asking you to do is to tell me where the global pattern of rich countries are. So where are the rich countries in the world? So in front of you, you've got figure 1. This is a choropleth map showing you all the different countries of the world split up. Then they've been coloured using the key to tell you how much money each country makes on average. The actual graph is looking at GNI per capita. So GNI per capita is just how much money is made per person per year in each country. So it's an average of each country, each person in each country. And the highest you can have is $43,430. The lowest you could have is $840 or below, okay? So you're going to use the key on the side to look at the different countries and continents to answer this question. Now, as it's a describe question, you need to use the GCSE acronym. So what's the general trend? Look closer in at different continents. Specifically, it's happening in this country. And then finally, is there an exception? And I'm going to go through that with you now, okay? So the first one we're going to look at is what our general trend is. So first of all, we're going to divide the world up using the equator. I've already labelled on the map north and south, so you can see that. And we're looking at a general trend of whether the north or the south has higher wealth, okay? And again, we're looking at those countries or those areas that have really dark blue colours. So is there more dark blue in the north or the south? and you're looking at either side of the equator, okay, for the first bit of this answer. We're then going to look in closer in, and we're going to look at specific continents. So which continents have the highest GNI? And again, we're looking at those dark blue colours, and there should be two continents in the north that have high GNI, okay? Because we can see that the north has slightly higher GNI than the south, okay? We're then going to look in specifically, and we're going to look then at the countries within the continents that have those dark blue areas, and I've labelled a few using the arrows, so can you pick them out? Okay, which countries are those? And again, can you use the data? When it says data, it's talking about the highest data, so that would be your $43,430 to match that, okay? And then finally, why is an exception? An exception just means what's an anomaly to your general trend, so that's something that goes against what you've said was your general trend. So if you said all of the north is wealthy, is there a continent in the south that is actually wealthy as well, has that same $43,430, and there is one continent in the south that doesn't match that, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do then is answer the question using the sentence starters. So for developing, can you complete the first two red boxes? So what's the general trend? So is the difference between the north and south? Closer in, the wealthiest continents are this, okay? For secured, can you answer the two red boxes that have just gone through and then do the orange box? That's where you need to add in the country that has $43,430 or more, and that is in those two continents you've already talked about. And then finally, the exception. The exception to this rule is because it's in the south. So which continent is in the south that is actually has a high GNI, okay? And that's your master to complete the green, orange, and red boxes, okay? So just pause the video now so you can complete this task. So our final learning objective today is to look at measuring development. We've already looked at what development means. We've looked at where HIC and LIC countries are located. We now need to look at how we decide whether a country is a HIC, a high income country, or a low income country, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the following images, and these images all relate to different ways that we can measure development. Now, measuring development is about looking at how rich a country is, so how much money or how much economy they have, or looking at how socially developed they are, so what the social well-being is of a country, so how well looked after people are in that country. So do they have access to things like education, healthcare? Do they have access to clean water? Okay, so these images all represent different ways that we can measure development. The first one is gross national income, and we've just looked at this in our previous task where we looked at GNI in different countries. So that's the same, and we're looking at how much money people make on average each year within a country. The second one we're going to look at then is our birth rate, and that's how many babies are being born each year. And again, if your birth rate is high, that doesn't mean that your country is highly developed. The higher your birth rate is, actually is the opposite. You would actually have a lower level of development because of things like a lack of contraception, lack of education, lack of healthcare. These all lead to people having more children, which means that actually your development is generally lower. Whereas if you've got a low birth rate, your development will be higher because generally you've got more women going out to work, making money, so they're having less children. They've maybe got better healthcare, better education, so they know about things like contraception, so they're not having more babies, okay? Same with your death rate. If your death rate is high, if you're having a higher amount of people dying, that's a bad thing, because that would mean that actually your level of development is lower. If your death rate is low, so you have less people dying, it means that you're having a higher level of development because maybe like I said, they've got better healthcare. Okay, next one we'll look at then is literacy rate, and that's how many adults can read and write within a country. And again, if you can read and write, that means you've got a good education, it means you can get a better job. Okay, we've got access to clean, safe water, so that's water that you can drink, you can wash with. Okay, social development. And we've got doctors per person, so how many people have access to a doctor in a country. And then finally, you've got your life expectancy, which tells us how long on average people live. And again, if your life expectancy is high, so you've got a life expectancy of say 75 or above, that means people are living longer. They've got better healthcare within the country because they've got better medicines to keep you alive for longer. Okay, maybe better education again because people know how ways to live healthier lifestyles so they can live longer. And these all link to better levels of development within a country. Okay, so your task then. I am going to ask you to open up your Second World War activity today, and this one is going to be linking up your different measures of development to the definition of development. So you've got some examples on the board already. There'll be a couple more. You're going to link up the definition to the correct measure of development. Once you've done that for developing task, I want you to then create an image for each measure of development. So that's a picture for each one. So for example, gross national income, you're going to draw some sort of money, okay? For secured, I then want you to label whether it's a social or an economic level of development, measure of development, okay? Measure of development. So if it's social, it links to people. If it's economic, it links to money, okay? And then for mastered, which of the development measures do you think is best to measure and the level of development within a country? So I think, for example, literacy rate is the best measure of development because. So just explain why you think that's the best way. Once you've done that, can you take a picture of your work ready to upload to ClassCharts? So you can just pause the video now. You need to go over to WordWall and then come back and complete the following tasks. Pause the video now. So that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Just before we finish, just want to go through what I want you to upload to ClassCharts. So can you first of all upload a screenshot of your definition of development and your explanation of the country's development? I then want you to, which links to the first learning objective, which tells me that you understand what development is and how it links to HICs, NEEs, and LICs. And then the last thing I want you to upload is your images of the different measures of development. And that links to understanding the different ways we measure development and what their strengths and weaknesses are, okay? So thank you for participating in today's lesson. Really looking forward to seeing your work. Keep up the good work, Year 9, and I'll speak to you next lesson.